So, okay, we're recording. So, hi everybody, and thank you for coming to our second book discussion. I'm pretty excited about this. I hope you guys are too. We are discussing The Mary Lincoln Enigma by various authors, including our own Donna McCrary. Yay, Donna. So I wanted, before we started discussing the book, I wanted to ask Donna to tell us a little bit about how this book came into being.
All I can tell you is my experience with it. I don't know the background, per se. The editors on this book are Frank Williams and Mike Berkheimer. And one of them, both of them, whoever, originally came up with the idea of creating a book of essays about Mary, and every essay would be written by a different female historian, so that the book would be an example of the female voice on Mary Lincoln. Kind of, it's like every book out there, basically, with the exception of Jean Baker's book and Ruth Randall's book at this point, most of the books had been written by men, so they wanted the modern female version of it. Yes. They pitched the idea. And remember how in our last book discussion, Jason was talking about how many times he had to pitch ideas sometimes before it would actually occur? Well, this one failed miserably. And the publishing company basically said, we do not want this idea. And they gave them a list of names of who would be writing these different articles. And like I said, there were 10 or 12 of us. And please don't ask me who those 10 or 12 are at this point, because I don't remember. I remember a few of them, but not all of them. And anyway, they said that it had to have the male voice because those were the most famous authors on Mary. And if they wanted to publish the book, that's the way it was going to be. So I don't even know if they contacted the other women and said, you're not included anymore. I got a message basically saying we had to revise the author list, and you made the final cut. You made the final cut. I find it very interesting that out of the 10 to 12 women they had initially wanted, only 2 of us, 20%, made the final cut. So I'm not complaining about the selection of the authors they chose. I think there's some excellent articles or essays in this book. I've enjoyed reading all of them. I like a lot of the different topics that they've covered, but I would still like to see that book with the female historian's voice. And sadly, I don't think it's going to get published. Unless somebody wants to put up, $20,000 and we'll publish it ourselves.
As soon as I win the lottery, I'll do that.
I appreciate that. Joan Howard says the same thing.
Yes, that'll be my first project. First I got to buy those lottery tickets, which I never do. So don't know how I'm going to win, but.
Exactly. That's the same thing. So once we had the final list, everybody wrote their essays. We submitted them. I've learned a lot about collaborative writing with this book. I'll probably never do that again. But this was a good learning experience. So I'm glad for the experience of that. And that's basically what we got, was experience. The best thing that came out of this for me is that after the book was published, the copy editor on this one contacted me and said, what do you have next? We're interested. So for me personally, that was the best thing, because where Jason's talking about going through 10, 12 different publishers to get a book done, I'm not having to do that. I just have to get it past the review board. So that's been a huge help. and I'm very grateful to my copy editor for allowing me that opportunity. So that's basically how the book came to me.
Okay, cool. So there's a bunch, I don't know where to start with this. Should we start with your essay in the book, or what do you think?
I've got a question
Yeah, go ahead.
for Donna.
Go ahead.
Who proofread that book? There are spelling errors in it.
The copy editor, well, okay, there are two editors in this book. That is the Honorable Frank J. Williams and Mike Berkheimer. They were the original editors. And then there was a copy editor from, what is it, Southern Illinois University Press?
Yeah.
SIU.
Okay.
So who the actual copy editors were at SIU, I have no knowledge of that. I only know, and it could have been more than one. You know, they could have divided and conquered essays. I don't know. I only know about the one who contacted me at the end of the ordeal and said, we'll publish whatever's next.
You're in it.
So
Well, somebody needs to learn to spell and use pronunciation and all the other symbols.
I have also learned from writing, from working with this same university press, that what is good for one book is not good for another. And it gets very confusing, especially when you're talking about footnoting. In Jason Emerson's book, for example, he got to abbreviate the titles of the books in his footnotes. I don't get to do that. I have to write out every time I document or I quote from one of Mary's letters, I have to write, Jason got to write Life and Letters, you know, Turner and Turner, page, blah, blah. I don't get to do that. I have to say who wrote the letter, when Mary wrote the letter, who she wrote it to, state that it's a letter, publish. I have to write out Turner and Turner, Mary, you know, Life and Letters, and then the page number. So it's a very, it gets very confusing, especially when you're looking at other books for inspiration. You know, like, oh, this is a book published by SIU. Let me look and see what Jason did. Oh, this is a book published by SIU. Let me look and see what, you know, someone else did. I don't get to do that.
All right. Does anybody else have any other questions about how the book came to be, or anything like that? I
don't think it's still in print.
It isn't?
I don't think so.
You can get it on Amazon. I know that.
You can get it on Amazon, but like, can you still get it at the Lincoln Home Visitor Center?
Pam, do you know?
It was there last summer, but the visitor center hasn't reopened since March. So
So
Oh,
who
okay.
knows?
Well, maybe it still is in print.
yeah, I think they had a couple of copies on the shelf last summer, if memory serves me. I've slept since then a lot.
Well, since we don't get, since the authors do not get the royalty checks, I have no idea, you know, when it does and does not sell.
You
So
don't even get any piece of the pie?
No.
Wow, that sucks.
yeah,
Like I said, this book has been a learning experience, and
I would think so.
I will never do a collaboration book again.
you were paid in education.
Wow.
Paid in education. We did get a stipend for writing the essay, but no, we do not get royalties.
You got your name in this book. You can say it's in here for what it's worth.
Hey, I'm one of 2 women authors in a book that was supposed to be all women.
Right.
That's the best thing I could have hoped for.
I agree.
Well, and my relationship now with SIU.
True. So you did get something, although,
I did get something, yeah.
but yeah. So I guess since we have you here, I guess we'll start with talking about your essay in the book, Fashion Plate or Trendsetter. And as you can see behind me, I have the whole book, Fashionable First Ladies. If you don't have it, why not?
Exactly.
I've
If
got
you
3
don't have
copies
it,
because I
I
keep
have copies.
misplacing it.
Oh, you keep misplacing it.
I keep
Get
losing
2
it. I gotta
copies.
Buy another one. So you're making a load off of me because I keep losing it. It's like,
Well, you know, I especially like the dedication in Fashionable First Ladies.
oh yeah.
It's dedicated to me and Donna Daniels and Mary Lincoln. So
The original coterie.
Donna
I
Daniels.
have to
can
tell a
can
story.
I was going to tell the story about Donna Daniels and the dedication, if it's okay with her. Do you remember?
Go ahead and tell that one. Then I'll tell my title story.
Okay, so just a few months after Fashionable First Ladies came out, Donna Daniels and I live close together, and we get together for lunch every once in a while. So we had gotten together for lunch, and we're talking, and then she says, "Oh, I need to tell you about this great new book that came out. You really need to read it. I can't recommend it highly enough." And I said, "Oh, really? Is there a new book out?" And she said, "Yes, it's called Fashionable First Ladies." And I said, "I think I know that book, considering that it's dedicated to both of us." But it just goes to show that she was promoting it to everybody.
Thank you, Donna.
She was so intent on promoting it. It was very cute.
Well, my story is I am horrible at titles. I just cannot create a good title for anything, or at least ways one that suits editors and publishers and everything. So could not come up with one. And I like repeating sounds. So when you look at Lincoln's Table, it's Lincoln's Table, a president's culinary journey from cabin to cosmopolitan. And I was trying to think of something with fashion and, and first, but then I had to get Mary Lincoln in it. And so I was at the local library and I was complaining about my lack of creativity when it comes to a good title. And the lady who works at the library suggested this, Fashionable First Lady, the Victorian Wardrobe of Mary Lincoln. And I went, I like that. And I said, do you mind if I use it? And she said, no. And I said, well, how much are you going to charge me for if I use your title? And she said, oh, nothing, just dedicate the book to me. Well, her name just happens to be Mary. And I said, I can do that. So if you're in my neck of the woods and you hear someone saying it's dedicated to her, that's, and 2 other women who she has no idea who they are, that's her story. But it really is Mary Lincoln.
All right, so your essay, I'm sure that they asked you to write it because of Fashionable First, correct?
Correct.
So what do you want to say about your essay?
You froze up a little bit. I missed part of the question.
I was just going to say, what would do you want to make any comments about your essay, or?
I was surprised that they wanted to the information that is in it is not, some of it's general reading material, but most of it is not. It's not casual reading. And the rest of the book is. Yeah, no, I'm talking about the essay in,
the essay,
in,
okay.
in Enigma, yeah. It's got a lot of stuff in there about, about cut of fashion and things of that nature, which, like I said, I don't think your average reader is interested in. Whereabouts, you take one about Mary's travel or the insanity trial, and there's a lot of interest in that, and people will hang on every word, but not particularly mine.
It depends on who you are and what your interests are.
That didn't make it into Fashionable First, and that was the comparison on Mary purchasing gloves And when the actress Sarah Bernhardt came to America, she had 350 pairs of white gloves in her trunks. And that made the paper, and everybody thought, oh, this is so wonderful. She's got 300, we're about at the same time they're crucifying Mary for having 300. So I was able to put a little more information about gloves in this book. Unfortunately, I did not have that information when I published FFL. So.
All right. So what did everybody think of this book? Do you have any questions specifically for Donna while we have her? Or do you have any general comments about the book that we can just start discussing it? This is kind of going to be informal, so.
Well, I'd really like to hear what other people's favorite chapter is.
That's a good idea. So what are some favorite chapters? And you don't have to say Donna's.
No, please say something other than mine. Just,
I would have to go find my copy and remind myself what was in it, to be honest with you.
Would it help if I kind of mentioned what the chapters were?
Please,
Because I've got it right here.
Yes, thank you. Because mine
Okay.
is upstairs
So-
under a pile of other books. So
The first one is There's Something About Mary, Mary Lincoln and Her Siblings by Stephen Barry. Then we have Mary Lincoln, Race and Slavery by Brian Dirk. Then we have Life at 8th and Jackson, An Unladylike Profession. Oh, no, sorry, I apologize. I pushed two of them together. Life at 8th and Jackson is by Richard Lawrence Miller. And then An Unladylike Profession, Mary Lincoln's Preparation for Greatness is by Kenneth Winkie. William Herndon and Mary Todd Lincoln by Douglas Wilson. I'm So Fond of Sightseeing, Mary Lincoln's Travels up to 1865 by Dr. Temple. Fashion Plate or Trendsetter by some unknown Donna McCrary.
Very true.
Beloved by the Coterie. The reports of the Lincolns' political partnership have been greatly exaggerated by Michael Berkheimer. A Psychiatrist Looks at Mary Lincoln by James Brust, MD. I Miss Bob So Much, Mary Lincoln's Relationship with Her Oldest Son by, surprise, surprise, Jason Emerson. Mary Lincoln Among the Novelists, Fictional Interpretations of the First Lady, Richard, I don't know how to say his last name. It's Etulain. I Look Too Stern, Mary Lincoln and Her Image in the Graphic Arts by Harold Holzer. And then an epilogue by Catherine Clinton. So those are the different essays that are included. So does anyone have a favorite or one that they found especially interesting? Donna, you were going to say?
I just want to point out that Catherine Clinton is the only other woman involved in this publication, and they did not give her a chapter. They gave her the epilogue.
Yeah.
Which means out of the 10 to 12, I'm the only one that got a chapter.
Which is pretty cool for
I
you.
didn't realize that. You were
Can I start this out?
Yeah, please.
Valerie?
Go right ahead.
I had a lot of trouble getting this book. We've got 4 big, large libraries in Lafayette and West Lafayette, and they had to drag this book in from I don't know where. And I am just to the middle of Donna McCrary's chapter, which is by far the best. It is a shame to me that they didn't accept women authors, because there, as it was pointed out, there's only a couple other books by notable women on Mary. And I really think that it needs a feminine posture, or I don't know the word exactly I want to use, but I would like to see some of this stuff written by women, because women know women. And so a lot of this stuff, not that I'm a big researcher, but I just kind of felt like it was a little boring. Now, I haven't finished the whole book, but that's my, they're not journalists journalists because they put in their own opinion. And I have a lot of problem with that. I'm done.
Yeah, I would like to see more women writing about history too. It's unfortunate, Donna and I always joke that you have to be a man to be a Lincoln historian, it seems like. I don't know why that is, but it has, right, Donna, it has been that way, or at least it seems that way.
The two people
I
are
have a
almost
question.
one, the way historians look at them. That's why they can't separate them. They're a pair, and it's like one cannot be discussed without bringing in the other one, and that's kind of disturbing. That she had her own life, and she had 17 years after their 23-year marriage. So she did have a life, and she should be enjoying her own life book by a woman.
Right.
I have a couple of questions. I loved Donna's chapter. You asked for favorite
That
chapter.
was my favorite without saying it, but
I felt it had real original research.
Thank you.
Whereas, really, I love footnotes, and so I really and I had just two unrelated questions. I hope I can ask them. I'm a little shy, but one is how do you think she felt when she was so attuned to appearance, and then for the last 17 years wearing black? How did she deal with that sort of lack of fashion? She redefined fashion. She made the morning clothes fashionable, but anyway, I just wondered if you could talk to that.
She didn't do without fashion in her last years. Her dresses that we only have one morning attire, and it's extremely fashionable for 1881. It's what she was wearing in New York. We have these letters where she's writing to her dressmaker saying, my dresses are horrible, I've got to have better stuff.
Right.
Yeah. And as the dealing, I'm sorry, my internet is cutting out horribly tonight, and I'm missing some of the parts of the questions. But it was not uncommon for women to go into mourning and stay in mourning.
Mm-hmm.
Her sister Emily did the same thing. Ben died in 1963, and Emily's in mourning until the day she dies in 1930.
Yeah. No. That's what I thought, but what my sense was, and I thought that's what you were saying. The other thing is, what do you think, in your research, did you also research, Lizzie Keckley and her influence on Mary's sense of fashion at all?
Little. I think Mary was more the type of person that would look at the fashion plates in the I don't think she really looked at what other women were wearing as much, except for the one lady's bonnet. But that was because she needed those ribbons. It was very important.
Ribbons.
But I think mostly she would probably look at a fashion plate and take it to Elizabeth Keckley and say, let's make this and make it better.
Mm-hmm.
We need more.
Her books.
Wasn't there a story about she receiving a note from Queen Victoria shortly after the assassination, and Queen Victoria loved Albert so much that she said that when he died, she would wear black forever. And Mary thought that was what her life would be too. Now, I don't know where I remember reading that. But anyway, that was a story that I had heard or read.
She did receive a letter from Queen Victoria. She
froze. Hopefully she'll come back.
I'm having a senior moment. Princess
Okay, you
Eugenie.
froze too, so.
Huh?
You froze. So if you were having a senior moment, you were frozen.
Oh, okay. But I mean, I don't want her to think, I don't want anyone to think that Mary wore black just because Queen Victoria did. A lot of women wore black because Queen Victoria did. She sort of set the norm for people in England. But, you know, as Mary had pointed out early in her presidency, and was pointed out more than once, you know, she wasn't doing things just because it was done over in Europe. She did things her own way. And when I look at the few dresses that we have of hers, and there are very few, but when I look at those and then I go to Godey's, I'm looking at an exaggerated fashion plate. You know, I'm looking at, you know, okay, here's this dress. We know exactly when Mary wore it because there's a newspaper account of, you know, what this dress looked like, and she's wearing it. And then I go to the spring 18, or, you know, summer 1861, and well, there's the fashion plate.
All right, so I noticed a few minutes ago, Rebecca, you had said that you had a question and you kind of got, it got missed. So did you want to go ahead and ask what your question was? You're on mute, my dear. Should I take you off mute, or there you go. Okay.
I am not a Mary Lincoln interpreter. I am an interpreter with the 2nd Minnesota Battery of Light Artillery in Minnesota. And I'd like to make a comment, if I may, on the first chapter, which is entitled, There's Something About Mary. I found it very interesting to read his comments about the interaction of a large family, and how the large family may have had an effect on her. My mother was the oldest of 16 children, so I have a real background in how those kinds of large families interact. And that was the first time, as he was writing his essay, that made me start relating some things that I'd seen in my own family with her family. And I found that very intriguing, and is going to give me some more thought processes. And I am very interested in her, and so this just gives me something else to look for. And I'm a librarian. Librarians never charge, but they do sometimes ask for dedications.
Donna, being that you are one of the experts on the Todd family, do you have any comments about that?
We also have a question in the chat room.
Yes, we do.
About the family, and there seems to be a bit of alcoholism in Mary's family.
So maybe you can address both of those.
Maybe. I'm trying to think what I really want to say about the Todds. They're not a normal family by any means, in my opinion. They are aristocrats. They are, a friend and I have an expression that we use quite frequently, and he better hurry up and get this published or I'm going to publish it. And that is, before America had the Kennedy dynasty, America had the Todds. And when you look at early American history, you find the Revolutionary War heroes, you find the ministers that were bringing education and spiritual life to communities. You find the pioneers, you find the doctors who are creating, you know, wonders in what was then modern medicine. And they all had very large families, but so I don't know. I mean, in today's world, we would look at that and say the dynamics in a large family is definitely very different, and it is. But it was so normal for all of the Todds. I don't know if having a large family affected Mary. Having a stepmother affected Mary greatly. and the division in the family definitely affected Mary. Because, you know, I mean, she's up there, she's the fourth child born. So she's kind of a middle child. You know, if you look at birth order psychology, she should be a middle child, but when you look at her behavior, she's like a baby. She's like the baby princess. And I always found that very interesting about her. I like Barry's book, House of Abraham. He didn't get into the Todd family dynamics in the book as much as I wished that he had of. He got more into the politics of it and the politics with the war. And, you know, and I want those sister and brother relationships. To answer the question about the alcoholism, yeah, there was alcoholism in the family.
That wasn't unusual though, was it?
That's not unusual. And then she mentions George and Levi, and them being cruel. I don't know that I agree with that. The only mention I have ever read of Levi being cruel is in Jean Baker's book, and we all know how I feel about that. So, and in her book, Jean said that Betsy testified that Levi whipped and burned the family slaves. And this was supposed to be from an affidavit from a court case. So I went down to Lexington and I pulled the court case and I read it, and that's not what it says. Betsy accused Levi of whipping until bled, not burned. And yes, that's a horrible thing, but it's not the same as burning someone alive. Yeah. And or, you know, or punishing them with fire. And also there's no proof that Levi did that. It was an accusation in a court case where Levi and George are trying to get their rightful part of the inheritance. Mm-hmm. And Betsy was trying to stop them from getting their rightful inheritance. So I'm going to assume, based on what little I know of human psychology, there was probably a lot of accusations going around on both sides that are not true. And like I said, that's the only thing of Levi I've ever read where he's cruel. He did have a drinking problem. There is no doubt about that. George liked to drink. And I just realized I misread her question. She was talking about George and Levi being alcoholics and George and David being cruel. I would go along with that. David, I think, is the most cruel of all of them. David is a very weird young man. He left home when he was 14. And what we hear about David may or may not be true. He supposedly went out west to find gold and silver. We know he did find gold and silver, but there's no record of how much or whether he gained, you know, wealth from it. George is almost like a split personality. You have people saying that he's very cruel because of his comments about Lincoln and some of the things that he said and did during his lifetime. And many historians are very angry at him for bringing the lawsuit against Betsy Humphreys Todd. And then at the same time, you have patients who said he was the most wonderful man in the world. His first wife left him on grounds of cruelty, and his second wife thought he was fabulous.
Sounds like it's a very normal family.
Standards. You have that many children in a family, and you're going to have that many different personalities.
Yeah, when you have that many kids, I mean, there were 14 that were surviving until the war. You know, so I mean, good God.
And the last part of the question was
married sisters,
married sharp-tongued sisters. especially Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Although that's not a fair statement, because we have her writings. We have a lot of her letters. We don't have any letters of Anne's. We have a couple of letters of Anne's. I have never seen a letter written by Frances Wallace.
Mm-mm.
And some of the sisters, the half sisters, I have not read much from Martha, and I have not read anything from Kitty, nor have I found much from Margaret.
So hard to say.
It is, it's hard to say, but definitely Elizabeth was very sharp-tongued. Of course, Mary thought that Anne was sharp-tongued, and she probably was.
The matriarch of the family of the kids. So, I mean, when you think about it, she was their matriarch.
Yeah.
Especially the first family, because they didn't like Betsy. So, so they left it up
She
to
got
Liz.
married. Elizabeth got married and got out of Dodge.
She's smart. How old was she when she married? Like 16, 17? She was a kid.
That's what Jean Baker says, but she's actually much older than that.
Really? Okay.
I want to say she was 20 or 21.
You know how the Todd sisters always change their age.
Well,
They
Mary
do.
was top. I never, when I read biographies, like, what? How old are you? No, you can't be that old or that young. It's like,
Well, even in the census, their ages aren't right.
yeah, they're all wrong. It's
Mhm.
like, what? We know when you were born. Now, come on.
Well, is
So I think it's either the 1850 census or the 55 Midway census that Elizabeth managed to make herself younger than Mary. She's younger than all of them shaved years off of their age, but Elizabeth shaved off so many, she was younger than Mary.
Queenie, I can't remember which sister is it that has the wrong dates on her tombstone?
Frances.
Frances, because she had lied for so long.
Yeah, it's wrong.
It's wrong
And
on
it's
its grave.
understandable.
What?
It's totally understandable. She goes to Springfield. She's looking for a beau. She meets William Wallace. He asked how old she is. I mean, this is my theory, okay? She asked how old he is. She lies. And then she ends up marrying the guy. So she's stuck. She's got to live with that lie for the rest of her life.
She's stuck. Oh, well, it's just a matter of numbers.
Yeah.
And the way that we've figured out, or the way that I figured out how old she actually was, and her birth date was Levi, the brother Levi, kept an excellent family Bible.
Oh.
And he wrote all of their dates in this family Bible.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like in the case of the father, even the time of death. So very useful information.
Wow.
And I think he got the dates right.
Where's the Bible?
It mysteriously disappeared.
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
Where was it? Where did you see it?
I did not see it. What I have are Xeroxed copies. Wayne Temple saw it. And there were family members in Springfield, and they had the Bible, and they were going to donate it to the Todd home in Lexington back in the 70s when the Todd home first opened. And before they took off with it, Doc Temple asked to photograph or Xerox copy the genealogy pages.
Wow.
And so I got them from him.
I'll be darned.
And supposedly, according to the cousin who had the Bible, she entrusted it to these two other cousins to take it to Kentucky. And they swore up and down they took it, but the Todd home never got it. So no one knows where it is.
Well, let's put it out on Facebook. I bet somebody does.
Oh, I'm sure. But it's probably in a family member's home. And legally, since it was bestowed or bequeathed, whatever you want to say, to the Todd home, I don't know if the Todd home would have a legal claim on it. So that's definitely a can of worms I would not want to open.
No. I'd still like to see it.
Well, I'm hoping that whoever has it someday says, this is really cool, let's give it to the ALPL.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hoping happens. And I say that for many reasons. The main one being they have a vault to preserve it in
Mhm.
and properly store it. And a lot of other historic places do not have that.
True.
Well, that's about all we got.
Yeah.
Well, at least Dr. Temple got the photocopies of it,
Yeah.
Right.
so that's good. What other comments or questions do we have about anything in the book, or somebody else want to say what their favorite essay is or their favorite topic? I want this to be, open to everybody. What else? What other topics do we have here? Let me look in here again. Let's see.
Well, Valerie, which one was your favorite?
It's been so long since I've read it. I don't really even remember. I just knew I liked Donna's because it was more what I was looking for, a woman's point of view. And, so I
Right.
did like Jason's, but it was just typical Jason writing. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I like Jason's writing, so I liked his.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember because.
And I can't remember Harold Holzer's one.
His is about artwork.
Oh, okay. I probably didn't like it then because I would have probably found that a bit boring.
Oh yeah, Harold Holzer. You're talking about the I
Yeah.
Look Too Stern.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, the last two chapters, Mary Among the Novelists and I Look Too Stern, are probably my two least favorite ones.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it didn't sound like it would be anything I would have liked.
Yeah.
I look too stern. That's
Yep.
definitely a man's point of view.
Well, didn't she say that about some of her?
It's a quote. It's a quote.
Yeah. There was times that she said her hands looked too big too, if I remember correctly.
I think she's got
Her
elegant hands. They're very long and so. I mean, she's got the longest fingers for being so short. In that one picture, her fingers look like they're this long. They're just very long and slender. And I thought, God,
Which
for somebody
picture is
5'2",
that?
huh?
Which picture?
The one that they say they always, I think it's her what they call her engagement picture. You can see her hands in there, and they say you can see the wedding ring. It's their wedding picture, but I've never seen the ring. I look at that picture and I keep looking, and I do not see a ring.
I'm gonna see if I can bring it up.
This one? This picture?
Yes. Yeah. Is there a ring on that finger?
Yes.
Is there? Okay, because the
Yes.
one that they have at the museum, it's not the museum, on the Looking for Lincoln things that are downtown,
Mhm.
they have that picture, and I look at it, it's like, there's no ring on that hand. There's no ring, so I don't know if they blurred it out or what.
I think this is a daguerreotype. This picture is a daguerreotype.
Yeah.
And there are images, like if you get the original, thank you. If you get the original from it, you can see it a little better. But see, yeah.
Oh, you know what? I was looking at this hand. I was looking at her, what I would call her left hand, but I guess this is.
There's a ring that I'm circling. You all can see my
I
screen,
can
right?
see that, yeah,
Right.
but I've been looking at the other hand, and I think that's why I was never seeing it, because it was all scratched out.
So it looks like that ring has a diamond on it right
Yeah.
there. Or is
Which
that
I
just a
don't-
scratch?
Well, a lot of daguerreotypes also, when they were printed on the glass, they were flipped.
Ah,
Yes.
That's why.
So I've always assumed that this was flipped, and I never thought it was an actual diamond on there. I think there was something with the emulsion.
yeah, I think you're right. It
Yeah.
does look like it's something on
because it does, it fits the other specks of emulsion in that area and also on the other side. So I believe that that was actually flipped during the printing on the
That makes
glass.
sense, because I've always been looking at it square, that was her left hand on the higher one was her left
Right.
hand.
There are a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah,
daguerreotypes that
thanks for
have,
that, Darren. I appreciate you explaining that, because I don't know, whatever reason, I kept thinking that was her left hand on the top.
there
Well,
are
I'll go back and look at the picture now downtown.
there are a lot of daguerreotypes throughout history that have really confused researchers unless they know of the flippage that happened with a lot of them.
Yeah.
Especially with John Quincy Adams when he had his first stroke. A lot of folks thought, oh, well, it happened on his right side. Well, no, it had actually happened on his left side. And when he went for some of his final sittings, those got flipped too, and it confused people for years until they read some of his wife's letters that his stroke actually affected his left side.
Yeah. Well, I've seen a picture of Lincoln and it's flipped because his mold's on the wrong side. I know that's true, because it's like, why is that mole on the wrong side? It's like, oh, I guess I got it screwed around. Because everybody was doing that about Catherine Clinton's book because she had the picture backwards, but she did it on purpose because she said she wanted it to be the other side of Mary Lincoln. That was what it was representing. It's like, oh, okay. That was real clear. Not.
Maybe that was in the introduction.
I don't know.
I just had to write an introduction for my book, and I had to be very clear in what those chapters were about and everything. So maybe that information was there.
Okay, so that's that. What else does everybody have to say about this? Jeanette, besides misspellings, did you have a favorite chapter?
Donna's.
Donna's.
I think we're all set on Donna's. It was the most, to me, it was the most about Mary. The rest of it was about personality things as opposed to her. And I mean, I know personality is, but I don't like analyzing people when you don't know them and you can't talk to them. I once had a psychiatrist approach me and said he wanted to do a psychiatric evaluation of Mary Lincoln. Would I step in and do this? And I said, I'm not Mary Lincoln.
Right.
I said, my feelings are not hers and I cannot replicate what I do not know. I said, all we can go on is assumption from what we read and go from there. That's all we've got. I said, no, that wouldn't be fair to Mary or it wouldn't be fair to me or whatever. But it's like, no, I don't think
You might have gotten thrown in an asylum.
I mean, it was hard enough just doing the insanity retrial, and try and approach that legitimately. It was difficult. And I had to bring Mary's anger and humor into it because I don't think she would have been a happy camper. And she would have been flippant and she would have been condescending in being put into that position. We did get a lot of laughs though, because I couldn't remember something about her girth when she commented about her girth. And I couldn't remember the phrase. And he was asking me, well, you feed yourself. And he says, now, what is it you always say about yourself? And I just looked at him, I went blank, and I said, you seem to know so much about it. Why don't you tell me what I say? Got a good laugh, and he said the phrase. And it's like, oh, yeah, okay, that's what it was.
My compliment to Donna is that it was kind of like reading the Bible. If you know the culture of the time, it explains so much. And Donna, you did a great job in bringing the times and what was going on in those times. It was the best chapter.
Thank you.
Yep.
I really like the one that Wayne Temple wrote on the sightseeing, partially because I'm fascinated by Mary's travels. You know, I want to know where she was. I want to know what she saw. But I do wish that he had done more past 1865. I want to learn more about her European trip.
Well, I think that goes back to something I think it was Pam was saying about nobody looks at Mary after 1865. They're looked at as a
After
pair.
1865, they ignore her.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, like it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
you know?
And Mary was a very good person at mourning. She was good at it. That was something she excelled at, was being in mourning. And I'm not saying that being critical, I'm just saying she was very good at being a person that was heartbroken and trying, and they need to expound on that side of her because it gets lost. It gets lost in everything.
I think it would be terribly difficult to, I mean, when you're writing a book or working on any project, you invest so much time, and I think it would be almost dreary to live in her world for those last 17 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Plus,
I just don't, yeah.
there's, everyone has their speculation on, okay, she was bipolar, she was this, she was that, and the other. And like Pam said earlier, we can't go there fully. We're not really giving tons of credible evidence other than what we know through court records, what we know through her letters about her, newspaper clippings. It's not getting down to the source. And so much of it, as far as her, whatever her mental stability was, is mostly speculation from us.
Yeah.
Unless we were sitting right there next to her having tea or whatever, we would still be speculating. She's not here to defend herself. And I think that's really difficult too. But I think it's just tender territory. And, sadly, except to us, she's swinging on the coattails of the president. And when his story ends, she's not like Jackie Kennedy, because she was in the spotlight. She was beloved. Where Mrs. Lincoln wasn't nearly as popular as Mrs. Kennedy. We were fascinated with the Kennedy legacy and watching Caroline and John grow. And we were saddened when Mrs. Kennedy passed away in 94.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, Mrs. Lincoln made the newspapers at her passing, but none of the tributes that we would have loved to have seen her have had.
Well, they
So
had thousands of people at her funeral.
Right.
I mean, and it would, I think it would have made her heart feel good to know that these many people did come, but did they come out of morbid curiosity, or did they come out of affection and love for her husband? And that's the part that, I mean, I know she would have liked to known people came, but were they there for the right reason? And that's the part that breaks my heart, because, I don't think a lot of them were there for the right reason.
And no, but I think given her personality, she would have, look at all these people who came for me. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like, we had a huge affair, but what was it, due to some rainstorm or something that happened in Springfield? It was all about, everybody was here and blah, 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 blah. And the beams of the house were bursting. I mean, she would have been, I think, pretty happy with over 1,000 people coming to bid farewell.
I think she also would have been very pleased that all the businesses were shut down in her honor.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, you will be happy to know that in my next book, or the book that I'm working on now, there is a chapter on widowhood and exile. And I dig pretty deep into the European, the best I can. I've dug pretty deeply into the European years.
Wow, that'll be good.
Speaking of
And
that,
in the,
you know, we were looking, I was helping Donna look for something in the letters. And so I was going through all of the letters in the widowhood period, looking for something specific. And I don't know how many of you have read her letters from that period, all back to back to back, but it's one after the other of complaining and, oh, poor me, and woe is me, and oh, I wish I were dead. And oh, it's so hard to read. I mean, believe me, I love Mary. I mean, look at my necklace. Look at this. Look what I'm doing. I love her like she's a relative. But give me a break. Come on. If even I'm going, okay, enough.
That's what I meant when I said she's a good mourner.
Yes.
She's very good at feeling sorry for herself.
Yes.
But that was the one thing that drove me crazy when we were prepping for the trial, was I had to read these letters of hers, but they only had me read sections that were despondent and talking about, you know, killing herself and things like this. I said, that's not fair. I said, because the start of this letter, she's in a very good place. I said, but something sparks and she just kind of tumbles down into this despair. You know, that's not being fair to the whole letter. You're
Right.
just letting me read those because they were trying to set up the trial. I know what the whole point was. I said, but that's not fair to the woman.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I wonder today, if she were one of our friends, if we would categorize her as a drama queen. Now, also, we've got to step back to that period. To go back.
oh my God. I've got one that says drama mama, so that's right.
I've had this for years.
But
That's
I mean,
cute. I like it.
if I remember, didn't she also participate in dramas and plays at Mintel's?
yes,
So
she
I
did.
mean,
Yes,
and when we
she learned well.
yes, and when we watch even movies of that time period and everything, Scarlett O'Hara, she had a lot of the flair of Scarlett. I mean, think about the 1860 election.
Yeah.
Look at the two men. I mean, you know, they could have been Scarlett's Kennedy and Hamilton and Butler and the Tarleton twins all thrown in the mix. And plus, I mean, there always seemed to be that need for attention. I don't know, maybe growing up in the home in which she did, and then with stepmothers and more babies, or one stepmother and more babies coming. You wonder how lost was she in that mix. And
Well,
then
that's where I said that's where I said she has that baby princess syndrome.
yes,
Even though she's a middle child.
and how much was grandmother Parker feeding into all this? I find Grandma Parker to be,
She had
what
a
we know
lot to
about her,
do
I
with
find her
it.
to be a fascinating old pill. She just tickles me to death with, like, you can just see her going in,
Taking her on.
making a little slice in the family skin and throwing a little salt in it. She just seemed like,
Betsy at all.
pardon?
She didn't like Betsy at all.
Mm-mm. No, but what's everybody's opinion of Betsy?
Betsy thought that you know how I said that before America had the Kennedys, America had the Todds. Betsy believed that the Humphreys and the Browns, her family, were higher on that aristocracy ladder than the Todds were. And she let everyone know it. That is one problem I have with her. She may have been, Grandma Parker, I see as the person who, yeah, she's in there throwing that salt, but she's also trying to help her grandchildren remember their mother.
Yep.
And Betsy is trying everything she can
Wipe her out.
to kick her out.
Yep.
Erase the image. Yep.
And
Now,
another thing with Betsy, I mean, I think Mary's opinion of her, there's always going to be friction between a stepchild and a stepmother. So, you know,
Now,
Just-
what about grandmother Humphreys? How was she different than Betsy as far as personality?
Yes.
To study French because of her. So
Mary said that if she could be just like grandmother Humphreys when she grew up, she'd be very happy. Grandma Humphreys, though, died in, what was it, 1836?
yeah.
You know, so Mary's fairly young, you know, when she dies. I mean, she's grown, but not completely grown. But Grandma Humphreys, she emancipated her slaves. She spoke French. She read French. I think if it hadn't have been for the marriage, I think Grandma Humphreys and Grandma Parker would have been very good friends. You know, Grandma Parker rules Lexington Society, and Grandma Humphreys rules Frankfurt Society.
Yep. And I think they were both very down to earth type of women as opposed to this kind of a person. I mean, they just seemed a little bit more relaxed for me.
Well,
I like them. And
I think part of that is with their age, though, because
yeah, that's what I mean.
they're growing up in frontier Kentucky, and Betsy is more into brick and mortar Kentucky.
More modern Kentucky.
Yeah.
True.
all right,
And
going off,
probably more money by that time too.
looking at another of the essays in here, one is about William Herndon and Mary Lincoln. Does anybody have any comments about that relationship? Since there's an essay about that in this book. I'm sure there's got to be somebody that has some comments about that. Derek?
I didn't feel there was anything new that was uncovered. It was basically just an essay that, well, they hated each other, and she glided through a waltz with the ease of a serpent, and he was a drunkard, and just, you know, it was just my next door neighbors growing up. He was a great grandnephew of William Herndon. His last name is Herndon, Richard Herndon. And William Herndon wasn't even, as far as his, not ancestors, the people after him.
Descendants?
Descendant, thank you. Descendants. They weren't very fond of him. A lot of it dealt with the alcoholism. But there were also some whispers about being an abusive husband. And also, he wasn't very good at maintaining accounts, but it was not on accident.
Oh.
And one of the items referred to something in Springfield where, when he and Lincoln were law partners, that there was something that was not divided clearly, and it embarrassed the family, especially later on after Lincoln rose to greater heights. And that was an embarrassment to the family, and they were just like, we wish we weren't related to him.
Interesting. What does everybody else think about Mary and Herndon's relationship?
Brian Fox Ellis plays Herndon on occasion, and we've talked not at length, but we've talked about it because his impression of Herndon and their relationship really wasn't as rocky as people want to make it until he wrote his book. And once he wrote the book, that's when their relationship soured. And he said he feels that there was a love-hate relationship because they were both jealous of each other having Mr. Lincoln.
Yeah.
And it was, and that, Herndon had him all the time. They were law partners, they CSI. And Mary, I think, was a little jealous of the time that he spent with this man that she didn't approve of his lifestyle. But, and I can kind of see that they both were a little bit jealous of each other.
Yeah.
But the book really soured any relationship that there might have been in his opinion. And I kind of can see where he's coming from.
Well, she did grant Herndon an interview. So there must have been not.
She distorted, and that's what I think really
Right.
upset her.
Yeah, I mean, she obviously didn't absolutely detest him, or she wouldn't have given him the interview. I think. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
No, I agree totally that she would not, if she didn't care for him, she would not have sat down for that.
Now, I mean, I've seen some people say, oh, well, she did it because she knew Mr. Lincoln would have wanted her to. But if she hated him, she wouldn't have done it no matter what she thought Mr. Lincoln wanted.
Mr. Lincoln wouldn't want her to do anything that she wasn't wanting to do.
Right. What does everybody else think?
Well, I've always said that I speculate that William Herndon in Mary's Bell years in Springfield, I think William Herndon had a big crush on her and she turned him down, and that began a uncomfortable relationship.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I always say to people when they ask me, I say, well, when you're told you dance like a serpent and you're a biblical person, that kind of ticks you off a little bit. You're referring to me as Satan or, somebody that's not a nice person. And I said, Mary was very biblical. So I can see that would raise the hair on the neck a little bit.
But there's always been something there. I mean, that is such a peculiar comment to make. And I've often wondered if William Herndon just didn't have the savvy of what to say to someone of Mary's community stature and being a socialite. And he was maybe he was trying to be poetic like Abraham, which he really wasn't poetic with the women, but I mean, but I've always wondered if that was just one of those moments where Herndon was trying to fit in, to impress her. And, I can see, I don't watch snakes. They really don't appeal to me. But when you watch them move, there's a fluidity to it. And I don't know how we would appraise Herndon's dancing abilities, but I could see that analogy of, you move with the fluidity of a snake. It just, I mean, there is that part of me that's, and I can't stand the son of a bitch. I mean, I'll be quite honest with you. I can't stand him, but I feel sorry for him. And I think, well, maybe, just maybe it was just one of those moments. And we've all had those moments. So, I mean, we could relate. Yeah. God knows I've had those moments.
I think he was trying to impress the girl and he failed.
Yeah.
Miserably.
And she never forgot.
And his embarrassed moment comes down to us.
Yes.
And we sit here discussing it. He deserves it.
I can't remember who wrote it, but one of Mary's contemporaries wrote in her memoirs that Herndon was never a part of decent, I don't have the quote exact, but something about he was never accepted into polite society.
Right.
He was always outside of the Edwards, the Todds, those families, and tried ever so hard to fit in.
And do any of us know why?
I don't.
I would say the alcoholism had a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
What, Pam, what does your friend say as far as Herndon's?
Well, he thinks kind of like you said that, you know, Herndon was he was fresh out of college when they were getting together, and he was, you know, trying to, you know, be a like you said, a poet, and, you know, say something very eloquent, you know, and trying just to fit into her world, and it just backfired. And that's what, you know, Brian Fox Ellis, surely you do. He's a big interpreter, interpretates everybody under the sun. Swear to God. But that's he kind of said the same thing you said. Just, you know, he just said whatever he thought would sound, you know, beautiful to her without even, you know, thinking a serpent to somebody might not be the best word. Which I can see it, but Mary just, you know, I guess because she's a biblical person, she didn't take too hardly at it.
Well, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here and throw this out there. Do we really know what the serpent represented in the that would have been the 1830s, early 1840s? Because, you know, I mean, it is part of the symbol for the medical association. So obviously there's some positivity about it.
Interesting.
Maybe it's not as much of an insult as we think.
I've always thought of
us because we don't like snakes.
Well,
Googling that, Valerie.
What?
Are you Googling that?
You know I am. You can tell I was typing, huh?
I heard you say interesting. I thought she's going to Google it.
She knows whenever we talk on the phone and I say that, and then she hears tick, 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 tick. Let's see. Historically, serpents and snakes represent fertility or a creative life force. They are symbols of rebirth, transformation, immortality, and healing.
Okay, so he's accusing her of being pregnant.
I don't know about that.
Well, she could have taken it that way.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I just always thought biblical because she was such a religious woman.
In
And I just thought,
1840, Albert presented Victoria with an emerald set engagement ring in the form of a snake biting its tail,
Yes.
a symbol of eternal love.
Yes.
well, then Mary, what were you thinking?
So
It obviously it made her mad.
it made her mad, but I don't think she took it as eternal love. Clearly.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Or she didn't like the thought that he meant it that way.
She just didn't like the way he danced.
So that's what I've got on my quick little Google search there.
Well, thank you for that.
Google knows all.
And you just see Mary stomping on his foot in a huff and walking off the dance floor.
And Herndon was never invited to the Lincoln home. Although, being that they were business partners, maybe doesn't mean anything. Does anybody have any thoughts about that, or?
Well, they weren't business partners at the time she was dancing with him, so.
No, I know, but later on, I mean.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic though that he would become his business partner later, the one person that she pushed away so fervently.
So just another.
Well, wasn't there one chapter about that you didn't invite anybody to dine with you unless it was a business acquaintance or political person or something like that, Herndon had made the mention that he was never invited to dine with the Lincolns, but evidently he had been there for some occasion or whatever.
Hmm.
I wonder if he was
Wasn't-
there for parties
Yeah.
or some special receptions, but never invited to dinner as an individual guest of the Lincolns.
That could be.
Other than Isaac Arnold, do we have any recollections of anyone having been invited to the Lincoln home for dinner?
No.
We have recollections of being invited to parties, of being invited for dessert. I think there's some handwritten notes of Mary's, if you're not busy around, 8 o'clock, come on over, clearly past dinner hour. Did they invite people over for dinner?
They had unruly children, probably not.
Yes, exactly.
And
Oh,
in the White House years, she and Charles Sumner were good friends.
Mhm.
Didn't he get invited to the dinners at the White House, like privately?
yes.
They had dinners in Washington, but I'm talking about specifically in Springfield.
Right. And where I was going with that was, and there was someone else, and I can't think of it at the moment, but I wonder if you were invited to the Lincolns for dinner, that you had to be both mutual friends with Abraham and Mary, and not just one of his business associates or political associates.
Wow, Evans.
Oh, I didn't mean to shut everything down.
No, sorry.
um,
Sorry, I was asking Brian to get me something.
no, I mean, everybody just got silent like, okay, somebody hand the guy a Snickers bar, so I'll shut up on that one. Because in that period, the man ruled, and it would, he would have been setting the tone at the dinner table. But I can't see that happening at Mary's dinner table. I
I
think
can't see her inviting any women friends. What would be the point of that? She was pushing Abraham so politically that I could see her accepting a male to dinner, but not ever a woman.
well, I've always had the sense, and I mean, I'm using the word loose. I always had a sense she was a tomboy in many ways.
Mary?
Yeah,
Yeah.
not in the sense that we think of a tomboy, but women at that time period, they were pushed into the wallpaper. They only got 2 mentions in the paper, and that was basically when they were married and when they died. And it was usually the wife of. It was, the wife of Sam Johnson died, and no one knows her name. But I
Where'd he go?
just from, Mary's interaction with Henry Clay from a young girl on, some of the things that may have gone on at the Todd home in Lexington that she may have been exposed to. She just seemed like instead of hanging out with the women and have to do all the folderol that they had to do, she would have been so happy, involved, listening, even if she didn't say anything, to the discussions going on. That's where her mind was. I mean, it's like, that old advertisement, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. I think she probably wrote that before the commercial came out. She was an intelligent woman, and I just can't, she would have done all the niceties with her sisters and other women that they're supposed to do, but I think her heart was right there in the heat of the action with the politics of the day, with the men.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, excuse me.
Speaking of politics, one of the other chapters in here is about Mary's their partnership, Lincoln and Mary's partnership. The reports of Lincoln's political partnership have been greatly exaggerated. So what do we think about their political partnership? Was there one? How much of it was there? What are your thoughts?
I believe there was. It'd been going on since Martha Washington on up, except for Jefferson since he was a widower, but they were, I mean, I was listening to a podcast today on Andrew Jackson, and it discussed some letters of folks that had made comments about Rachel Jackson piping up every now and then to make a comment about a political item. So I've always deep down felt that Mary was right alongside him on a lot of things, and possibly until the White House years, when there seemed to be separation there. But in Springfield, I just no.
It's been a while since I read that article, but if I remember correctly, and somebody correct me if this isn't the correct interpretation of it, but I think that author's point was that Lincoln was a very, he was very political in his own right. He was an upcoming politician. He had a lot of ambition of his own, and therefore, you know, the partnership was not what a lot of female historians have tried to make it. If that's kind of what I remember from that chapter. Am I incorrect, or did I read a different article? Because I know I've read that, but.
Well, about 5 years before the author Irving Stone passed away, who wrote Love is Eternal, there was one thing that I found that was like, you missed that one, Irv. And he had talked about Grandmother Parker going up into her widow's peak to look out. Well, the widow's peak wasn't added until the turn of the century. But that was one little item he missed. So I really felt, and it was, oh, what's his name? Townsend? Someone,
Yes, William
Townsend. Yes. Who had pointed that out and said, oh, you got that one wrong. But in Love is Eternal, Jean Stone, Mr. Stone's wife, who was one of his editors and partners in research, in that book, Mary is like glued to his side when it comes to that partnership, and not just the pillow talk. I mean, she was reading the speeches and editing, and sometimes questioning, is this really the nib of what you want to say? And there was just something, yes, it's fictional lines, but there's always been something there in that writing that I found to be genuine as far as their partnership. And I don't think he felt she was intrusive. I saw Donna's hand go out.
Whenever we're asked about it, and in our presentations, and I tell people that Mr. Lincoln and I would never have met if he was not already involved in politics, before he even met me. Otherwise, he would never have been invited to the party in the first place. We did not travel in the same social circles. But if he was ever going to achieve very much in politics, then I was exactly the kind of partner he needed to have. Because I made sure he dressed properly, polished up his manners, knew how to give a nice dinner party, knew how to make small talk with people. And I say all of the things that a woman needed to do in the 19th century, or probably even today, to help her husband get ahead in his business.
And she was the right person for it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely.
I will never, ever, ever believe he would have gotten to where he did on his own.
And the accusation, and I don't remember off the top of my head who has made it, but the accusation that Mary pushed him into running for political offices that he had no desire for himself in order to satisfy her own stunted ambition. And, you know, I that's when I say, you know, he was already
It's already there.
involved in politics before he even met me. I didn't push him into that.
He'd already started, but I don't know, did his relationship go as high as the presidency? You know, I mean, he always wanted to be a senator because senators make the laws, you
Right.
know, they get to create the laws. But Mary would always say, but the president is the one who lets them become law. So, you know, and that was her persuasive argument was, yeah, you write them, but it's the president who determines if it becomes law. You know,
And
so
who was it that he said to them that the taste is in my mouth a little?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he kept him from taking that position in Oregon.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And wasn't there something in Bogota?
want to live in Oregon. It's burning up right now.
Oh, well, and I mean, you know, she supposedly said that when she was a young girl that the man she would marry would be president. I don't I don't know how that was documented, as far as, I don't know if it was just something, but, and I also remember reading many years ago that she turned Stephen Douglas down because he was a Democrat, not a Whig.
That is true.
So I mean,
You would want
yeah, she and Lincoln. I mean,
somebody that conservative.
this is probably a weak comparison, but you know, it's like young Bill and Hillary Clinton meeting during college.
I've always said that too.
They each possessed incredible minds,
Very hungry for the same thing.
instincts with things. So I mean, I just see that them hitting, and it's like two worlds collide and create this incredible partnership. And I completely disagree with any of the historians, especially of the male species, saying that it's the women who are pushing all of this, saying that Mary was a partner. I think it's just their male ego getting in the way, to be quite honest. Because, you know, well, there doesn't have to be a woman behind every throne. Well, there was in this case.
But I think there is.
Yes, I definitely agree.
Or a sister. There's somebody behind everything because, you know, I mean, and I know this is going to sound like, but women have just a better, I don't know how to put it, but we're more empathetic to things. We're more level-headed when it comes to a lot of things. Everybody says, well, your hormones. It's like, and I've watched the YouTube where he's questioning, she says, well, war was, you know, a woman will just have a moment, you know, a hot flash and she'll start a war. And he just looks at her and he says, and who started all the previous war? Men. So no, it's not a woman going to have a hot flash. It's women are going to stop it because we're not going to jump at every little nitpicky thing, if anything, in my opinion. But Mary, I'm with you. I think they were two forces that came together at the right time.
And I'm sorry, women are rudders.
Yes, thank you. We are.
You know, men can be standing there at the wheel of the ship, but it's going to be the woman who steers it. I mean, it's
Wow.
too well documented in history in too many cases. So, I mean, you know, that's just what I think.
Well, look how many wars have been started because of women.
Yeah, Helen of Troy.
Because of, not because she started it, but we're going to fight about her. And that's even more dumb.
My daughter-in-law got me a towel, brought me a towel the other day. It says, behind every great man is a woman rolling her eyes.
Oh, I like that. I'm sure Mr. Lincoln liked that as well.
We have a question on here that I don't want to overlook. It says, picking up on unruly children, any thoughts on Mary and Robert and how their relationship changed over time? That goes back to the Jason Emerson chapter on
Yes.
Mary and Robert.
Right.
So who has some thoughts about that? Anybody want to start out our conversation?
I've
On
always
that?
found their relationship very strange. I mean, he was
You know-
I feel like he was put between a rock and a hard place. He's a Victorian man marked by the Todd, family. He saw wealth. He knew what he wanted to be when he grew up. He set his sights for that, and he was trying to be a good son. And sometimes I think we give him a hard time. Was he right about it? I don't know. I mean, Mary was being very erratic, and but was it really? She wasn't crazy. She was taking care of herself. She was feeding herself. She was taking care of herself. So she wasn't mentally ill. She just was very depressed. But and at the end, when a son says to you, if you'd stayed in the mental institution a little longer, I could have made you some more money. That really bothers me. I mean, it was more about the financial means for his mom. Yes, I know he was protecting her, but it always has bothered me that was what was more important. Of course, then when he loses his son, Jack, suddenly it hits home. How his mother said, it's different to lose a son than it is to lose a brother. And he never understood that until he lost Jack. So it's just, he always said that his mother would have loved Hildine. She would have loved this house, and she would have loved that house. So he still loved his mom.
Because she loved the White Mountains and that whole area. And I saw the book at whatever the hotel was named, where she'd already planned their vacation or their time up there for the summer. I think it was 65 when, but it was neat to see that she still hoped they could be going there, even though the war at that point was still going on.
I will mention it is 8:38 now. We've been going for an hour and a half. We have had some people that have, if you've looked in the messages, that have had to drop out because, it gets late, and I understand that. I'm sure all of us would, well, not all of us, but a lot of us would sit here and talk about Mary all night.
Well, before we do too much, I have a favor to ask of everyone.
Yes.
I'm going to put everyone on the spot.
All right.
But I'm to the point in my book where we're doing the third read through. So we're editing, and the next thing I have to do, it gets read by the editorial board again in October to see if they're going to publish it this time. So the next thing I have to do is list the photographs that I want to use. So my question is, what photograph would you like to see in a book?
Of Mary?
It doesn't have to necessarily be about Mary. I mean, it can be, for example, one of them that I have located that will be in the book that personally I've never seen published before. I have a picture of the hotel in Germany where she lived. So.
Awesome.
So, anything.
How about when she was in France? Do we know what hotel she stayed in
We know the names. I have not located photographs.
France? It's in the foothills of the Pyrenees. That's all I know.
Oh. And she also spent quite a bit of time in Italy.
Oh, she did.
Mm-hmm.
The first time or the second time?
Second time.
Oh, really? I was under the impression she spent almost the whole time in France.
No, she traveled quite a bit.
Wow. Okay, that's cool.
You're going to like the chapter, Widowhood in Exile.
Sounds like it. I'm excited. And what is the entirety of the book?
What do you mean?
Well, what is That's the part of it. Is it just an overview of her life or,
There are 10 chapters.
huh?
And all of it's a Q&A book. So all of these are questions that I have either asked, that I've been asked by audience members, or some that someone will ask me a question and then it's like, oh, and it will lead me here. So I've taken it there. So we have the Lexington years, the Springfield years, White House, the darkest day of all, the assassination. We have the insanity file or trial, widowhood and exile, a
Wow.
relationship on her personality,
Oh,
a chapter on, and my peer readers so far have said they like this chapter the best. It's Mary Lincoln and race relations. I think it's called something about her relationship with African Americans, family connections, and beyond the grave. And beyond the grave are all those wonderful questions that I would always get asked that, if you're doing first person, you can't answer. How many grandchildren did you have?
that's when I step out of character and say, okay, well, now it's time to take off the bonnet and I'll answer your question.
For me, it depended on what I was paid to do at that moment, because a lot of times, I was paid not to come out of character, so I couldn't. Which is why I always enjoyed lecturing, because I get to do that. So we've got the gamut, it's and then it also has 3 appendixes. One is is a list of her friends, childhood, Springfield, kind of a reference, White House, a reference so that if you see the name, you can figure out who it is.
Oh, that's cool.
One of them is a list of her relations, her relatives. So you can keep those brothers and sisters straight, and with the cousins, because, unfortunately, the Todds enjoyed using the same names over and over and over.
Got to keep those
How many
married.
Elizabeths can we have? And then the third appendix is a timeline, just a date. It's divided by year and a date and where she was.
Oh, fun.
So she's in the White Mountains. She's
Kind of like a Lincoln log type thing.
mhm.
Daily deal. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Gosh, I hope it gets published. Thank you. I hope so. Please.
I've been told that I have the most comprehensive list of timeline for her that exists.
Wow.
And I'm not finished with it. And it's all not going to get in the book because, that could be a book in itself.
Oh, yeah.
But kind of a day by day.
He lived a lot longer than Abraham Lincoln did. So.
Exactly. And look how thick his day by day is.
Yeah, it's enormous. So.
I would love to see a family tree, a really great family tree with illustrations,
She's got one.
Yeah.
Got it?
Something that I never hear. I read about it 20, 30 years ago. And it was about her relationship with her great nephew, Louis Baker.
Okay.
And I keep forgetting to ask when we have our little gatherings. And he keeps falling through the cracks. And then after we're done, I'm like, oh, Louis Baker.
Yeah.
Very instrumental.
And a friend of mine who hangs out on all these things, her name is Feather Foster.
Yes,
Now
I know
try and say that when
Love
you've
her.
had too many popsicles at one sitting and your tongue's frozen. I just noticed, this was so funny that I brought this up, and it would have been hers, but it said, Mary Lincoln's last love, Louis Baker. I'll post it on the site, on the Coterie site.
Yeah.
But to me, I always felt like he was Eddie, Willie, and Tad for her, rolled into one.
But I've always felt that was my favorite scenes when we did The Last of Mrs. Lincoln, was my 2 scenes that I did with Louis Baker, because it was just full of love and her admiration for this young man. And you could feel it in the script. And those were my 2 favorite scenes, were those 2 scenes with him. And then, of course, the one when he comes and helps her find her way back to Springfield to pass away. But you know, just, it was just he is a good guy. He's a good guy.
I love that Mary took him to Kentucky
Hmm.
and took him to Lexington and the cemetery and introduced him to, you know, whoever was still remaining in town at that point, which would not have been very many people.
Bet she would have known.
Yeah. There's still quite a few cousins in there in town at that point, but you know, most of her girlfriend or most of her school age friends had married and moved away.
As did
But
she.
you know, I could just see them in a carriage going down Main Street and looking at whatever remained of the house at that point, and her saying, you know, well, that's where I lived and where Mr. Lincoln and I came, and then going over to Short Street and going, well, this is the house where I grew up. And
Did she take him to by Henry Clay's house? Because that was such a big part of her life.
we don't know where all she went. She probably did, because all we really have is a letter that Elizabeth wrote. Lewis had written to Elizabeth, and Elizabeth wrote, you know, to another relative saying, this is what I hear. But even that she went to the cemetery, I find interesting.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a kind of interesting there. It didn't seem
Yeah.
to be the place she liked to be.
Well, you know, I mean, yes, her mother and father are buried there. But the other relatives who are buried there, well, and Grandma and Grandpa Todd, and who she wouldn't even have known, but Grandma Parker is buried there. But the other Todd relatives, mostly who are buried there, are the Confederate family.
Yeah.
You know, by that time, Betsy and Martha and Elodie and Sam and Alex and David would have all have been there.
Didn't realize she'd
Because
outlived.
didn't Betsy erect a stone just for her sons who fought in
Yes.
the Confederacy?
Yes.
It's actually the cover of my book.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if I have that one handy or not.
Is this one?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you can see it.
That book. What is it called?
The Kentucky Todds in Lexington Cemetery.
It's available, right?
Through me.
For you? I can't-
Yeah.
There we go.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
That's neat.
Yeah, the tombstones are a lot cleaner in that picture than they are in mine. They're pretty dirty here.
It must have just been cleaned.
They must have.
You can see here's Robert S. Todd right here.
And Liza right next to him.
And yeah, Liza over here.
With
And
the
this
broken tombstone.
And this is Betsy's, right? Betsy, and it has on the side, doesn't it say something about the boys?
Yes.
I don't think there's anything else.
Probably.
Martha.
There's David.
Oh, there's David.
What's that one?
That's Grandpa.
Oh, that's Grandpa.
I mean,
Okay.
great grandpa. That's great grandpa.
Oh, no, it says wife of David Todd.
Oh, I was thinking of David, the one you showed before.
Okay.
So this is great grandma.
There's General Levi. Why is my
That's
visit me?
that's grandpa.
Jane Briggs.
That's grandpa's. Yeah, that's grandpa's wife. That's grandma.
Oh, and that's Betsy, right?
I can't.
Elizabeth L. Todd died February 16th, 1871.
Yes, that's the side of the big monument.
Yep. And
And most people don't realize this, but she died in Madison, Indiana.
Hmm.
So Mary outlived her?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, that's,
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. That's amazing.
Huh.
That's really cool. So we can't get your book, the Lexington Todds, or?
Yeah, I got tons of them. I can
Oh,
Get
okay.
some.
All right. I'd like to see that.
Okay. It's got, speaking of
How much it cost? I'll send you a check.
$10.
$10. Can you?
What? Can't you post any of these, all your books on the Coterie?
Oh, probably.
She should, but she never will. I don't know why she won't. I've told her
The
to.
I
address
have,
that we can
oh,
send-
you got that up. I've got pictures of the family in it that I could locate. Margaret Kellogg, Elodie Helm, Catherine Helm.
It's a great book.
Yeah, I remember when you were working on it, you know, and I was ready to, I don't think I ever heard any more about it, so I didn't know if it ever got published.
I had it, it was at the Lincoln home one weekend when we were there for Coterie.
Mhm.
And it's been in a few other gift shops. Oh, Books on the Square carries it.
Do they carry it?
Yes.
Okay, I'll go in there and get one then. I'll go tomorrow.
I don't know what they sell it for, but they carry it.
15 or 20.
Probably.
Wasn't one of your books in the gift shop at the Lexington home?
Lincoln's Table and
Yes.
Fashionable First. They will
Yes.
not carry this one.
Why?
I don't know.
That's weird.
The appendix of this is cemetery art and what cemetery art means.
Yeah, that's important.
So if you see a tombstone with a squirrel and a nut, it means religious meditation.
Mhm.
If you see a tombstone with a serpent swallowing its tail, it means eternity. And you know, there's animals and figures and objects and plants and trees and
Cool.
all kinds of things. My favorite is let me see if I can find it in here. The lion. The lion stands for watch guards the tomb and courage.
Fascinating. Well, I'm gonna have to go to Books on the Square tomorrow. I gotta go get my doctor. God, I just drew a blank. Crap.
All right. Well, we've gone. It's almost 9. I'm sure everybody's
Getting ready to
tired.
Cut out.
Well, other than family tree, I don't have any photo ideas from
Oh,
anybody.
okay. Photo ideas. Anybody else got any photo
Anything
ideas?
Haven't ever seen before would be nice.
See, that's it. I don't know what you haven't seen before.
But you,
I mean, I'm assuming people haven't seen the picture of the hotel in Germany because, to my knowledge, it's never been published. But
No.
other than that, oh, and I have a picture of Tad's school in Germany.
oh, that'd be interesting too.
Didn't they say he had a slight German accent?
Like German accent when he came home, and he was very well spoken. He lost his impediment, and goes to show what a little work can do for a child, Mom.
Wasn't it a cleft palate?
That's what they think. I don't know that they really know, but that's what they say, because you can see a kind of a slight scar in one of his pictures that they
Mhm.
say it's there.
But he could have fallen down the stairs and busted a lip, you know. It's,
been anything, but that's what they assume. But I think he would have had a little bit more problems than just a speech impediment if he had a cleft palate, because eating would be very difficult for food consumption with a hole in the roof of your mouth.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking he just might have had a tongue tied. Because when he's saying Papa Day, I mean, to me, that sounds like a child that's tongue tied and just needed to have his tongue clipped.
although now a lot of historians are saying that he didn't say Papa Day, he said Papa Dear.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they also argue over he's now with the angels and with the ages. So I mean, it's like we don't know.
Right.
Whatever your
Any
preference.
favorite pictures of Mary that you definitely think should be included? I've got most of them.
I like the one that's at the Todd house. That was it. One of her sisters painted or something of her.
Oh, the Catherine Helm portrait?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, I like that picture. It's such a lovely picture. It's
You
so
like
sad.
it?
It's so, I do, it's because it's soft. And the other ones are very, her
Yeah.
hair is very parted, it's very hard. And whereas that one has more of a girlish, you know, you can see the girl there as opposed to the president's wife.
Because
Well,
one of the
she
paintings,
painted 6 different pictures.
and
She
one's in the
painted 6
Lincoln
portraits.
bedroom,
Yeah,
Yes.
but I don't
and
know.
it's
I've only seen
considered,
the one that's at the Todd house that, and I just really liked it. And I can't
is it,
tell you which
the
one
one
it
in
is.
the White House is considered her official portrait. And I just never, she just looked like, to me, like a little rain cloud was over her in that picture, where she was just like, I mean, everything had a sag to it. Her dress, her curls, and, you know, from what we're used to seeing. But again, you know, that's, you know, the photographs,
Artistic interpretation.
I'm sorry.
Artistic interpretation.
Right. And, but the other thing is, it's just like, oh, when we say, oh, but we're watching a movie and that stuff's not real. Well, their photographs and daguerreotypes at the time were not real because they were all gussied up for them.
Right.
That wasn't every day for them. You know, those were your church or funeral clothes that you wore in the photos.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, that really doesn't, it gives us the image, but it doesn't give us
My
everyday life.
my granny used to say, those were, you took your pictures in the clothes you wanted to be buried in.
Well, I find it ironic that Mary Lincoln's official White House portrait was painted by the daughter of a Confederate general.
I know.
Oh my gosh,
I
yes.
find that amazing.
True.
I mean, granted, she's family, but still.
Oh, okay, we're back. Okay, her niece. I was like, what? I didn't. Never mind.
Catherine Helm.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It was
And
a blonde moment.
she painted 6 of those portraits, and 3 of them are lost.
Really?
The Todds weren't very good at hanging on to things, were they? Now a Bible and portraits of Mary.
Good.
What I find interesting is the one out of Hildene has disappeared.
Oh, you're kidding.
Mm-mm.
Of Mary.
Of Mary.
When did it disappear?
I don't know.
Oh.
Catherine had it painted and presented it to Robert as a gift because, you know, he had paid her so much money to paint this portrait. And
Just trying to help her out.
it was there when Robert died, and when the last Lincoln died, it was not there.
Wow.
Oh,
Well, the house went to one of his daughters, didn't it?
And then the granddaughter.
And the granddaughter, what is that little granddaughter?
Peggy.
Sold it. Drug money.
Wasn't Peggy an aviatrix?
Yes.
Yeah.
Peggy was strange.
I was just going to say she was an interesting person.
Oh, I mean,
strange cookie.
they
Definitely different.
yeah, they all kind of seem to operate on a different plane.
They did.
I mean, in many ways, I mean, yeah, Robert was that reclusiveness, but that makes me want to study Mary Harlan more. And because to me, there's another piece there with her in the Mary Lincoln saga and that whole line coming to, I mean, it just,
That whole relationship is very, for me, it's confusing because Mary was the one that introduced the two of them. And then for her to turn on Mary Harlan so severely. But I think when you have 2 women living in the same house, I think that was the rock that broke their backs, because Mary had moved in with Robert when Mary Harlan was in Iowa taking care of one of her parents. And then she comes back. Huh? Was it her father? Yeah. And then, you know, she comes back and now you got 2 wives in the same house. That doesn't work. One's the mama wife and the other one's the real wife. And
Part of the problem too with Mary Harlan is that she was actually in Iowa more than what historians
that's what I get the
admit.
Mhm.
She was there quite a bit with her family and helping, and the girls actually, well, Abraham Jack as well. That's where they went to school
Really? In Iowa?
in Iowa.
That's bizarre.
Because the Harlan home is part of, I forget what college there in Iowa.
Wesleyan University or
Yeah.
Wesleyan College, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Wesleyan.
But I mean, and the other thing, when we were talking earlier about Mrs. Lincoln's widowhood and her severe mourning habits, I can't help but imagine how that would have played on a young family. When you've got a couple girls at that point, and just, and Mary Harlan Lincoln wanting to be, parts of society and doing this and that and the other for her age. And then you've got your mother-in-law there just bringing the whole shit down. I mean, that could not have been easy for her. And, by this point, Mrs. Lincoln was getting to be even more needy with people attending. Okay, can you get this? I mean, I can't see her sometimes after the White House years going in and making her own cup of coffee or tea. She probably did, but once she left the White House, where they had servants and everything, and I know that Robert and his wife had servants, but I have a feeling she may have been a little bit too demanding for the Chicago Lincoln home. I mean, we're still not too long after the assassination, so she's probably still grieving pretty heavily, and that would, I think that would bring anybody down.
Grieving was a daily activity for her. I really do. Because I think every day she woke up waiting if this was going to be her day to join him. I mean, I have that feeling that every day was the day, next day was, will I go today? Will I be with him today? But I don't know. But that's just always the feeling I get. It's just like every day was just, it's kind of like Groundhog Day. It's like, it's just another day, just like the day before. Well, I'm going to have to cut out, so, because it's after 9 and I got things I got to go get done before tomorrow. So,
Bye, Pam.
great discussion. I've loved
Right.
every second of it, and I'm going to look for your book, Donna.
Okay. If you don't find it, just shoot me a message. And
I will. But I'm excited.
I've got a couple hundred copies of it here. So
Why does that not surprise me? You're a good author. That's what a good author does. Ask Don Jr. How many copies of his book did he have to buy? But I'm looking forward to this one. So I've got fingers crossed that they'll get you done. So
October.
good night, everybody. It's been great.
Good night.
Bye.
Hi,
Night,
Pam.
Pam.
Night.
So,
Just the four of it.
okay. We're the diehards.
We're the diehard.
We're the diehards. I'm still looking for photo opportunities. I mean, I'm seriously, because so far, all the pictures that have been mentioned go in the last chapter.
I'm going to stop the recording, by the way. So thank you for everyone watching the recording.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to stop the recording.
What